Welcome everyone to our market discussion for December 2025. In our presentation today, I'm going to focus on two main topics that's been driving the markets over the last 12 months. The first being the gold price and to what extent we believe the rise in the gold price is sustainable going into 2026. First, looking back at the year, we can see that the gold price have accelerated and is up by almost 60% since the start of the year. And when we compare that to global equities as benchmarked by the MSCI World Index, we can see that there's an outperformance of close to 40% for the last 12 months. And the question on investors' minds is, can this outperformance be sustained into the year ahead? And when we look back over historical periods of 12-month performance, what we can see is that there are distinct periods where equities compared to gold price underperforms. And we can almost categorize them into inflation events, geopolitical events, and equity bear markets. And if we look back in the middle 70s and late 70s, we witnessed very high inflation coming out of the US. That was on the back of an oil crisis. And we can see that the equity market underperformed gold by 60% in 1974. And around about 1979, another underperformance of 60% over a 12-month period. If we look at the geopolitical events, we can see the US invasion of Iraq, the first Gulf War, that was around about early 1990s. Again, gold provided support when the equity markets were under pressure as geopolitical risk increased. We've seen the same type of event in the global financial crisis and then COVID event also. So in events where there's perceived high risk, we can see that the gold price provides protection. Another inflation round played out in 2022, and now recently we can see also inflation is playing a role. And then, of course, an equity bear market like we've seen coming out of the late 1990s, we had a dot-com bubble that resulted in a bear market that lasted 3 years. In equity markets, it came under pressure again, and gold provided some level of relative outperformance. So these periods where equity markets underperform the gold price occurs now and again over cycles. And the question is, when we look forward, is what is the outlook for these type of events to occur in 2026? The first thing that we've noticed is that central banks are back in the gold market. They are purchasing gold again, where for decades they haven't been buying gold. And a survey conducted by the World Gold Council clearly demonstrates that the expectation for reserve banks is to be buying gold over the next 5 years. So almost three quarters of those central banks surveyed indicated that the allocation to gold will be higher over the next 5 years. And typically it will be funded out of US dollar bonds. And we can see again why they are holding this is to provide that protection in a crisis and to diversify their portfolios. So there's definitely a new buyer in the market that hasn't been there. And these reserve banks, if we just look at the amount of gold currently that they hold, you can see that the developed markets tend to hold quite a lot of gold in their foreign reserves, and the emerging markets are slowly building out their allocations. A very simple exercise conducted on the foreign reserves, we note, for example, that if these countries were to increase their gold exposure as a percentage of reserves to, let's say, at 25%, countries like Switzerland and Japan would basically need to buy up half of all the gold being supplied per annum If China were to increase their 7% to 25%, that will take up basically all the supply per year, which provides a natural floor for the gold price, as these central banks typically looking over just at the emerging market countries. You can see, for example, China typically will buy over a cycle. So for a couple of years, no purchases, and we can see then they start buying. We can see recently the increase there, but even at 2,000 tons, they are still way short of getting to a 25% exposure. So the central banks, especially those from China, Russia, and India, are definitely new buyers in the market, and they have basically established a natural floor for the gold price. Although the gold price is currently quite elevated, we suspect that any decline in the gold price will create an opportunity for reserve banks to increase again their reserves. If we look at geopolitical tensions, there's currently probably three that's probably front on the newspapers. The one is the Russia-Ukraine war. It seems that there might be good developments coming out of the conflict, but then once there's a proposal on the table, it seems that either party pull back again. The tension between China and Taiwan is ongoing, and the Middle East conflict. So these three events across the globe currently creates risk. And as we've mentioned, in an environment where there's an increased risk, gold tends to provide protection for those countries. The third factor that we are seeing that is also supporting the gold price is the concern about the fiscal policies being issued, especially out of the US. If we look at the government debt as a percentage of GDP, what we can see is this dark blue line here is that the US is increasing. So they are raising more debt relative to their GDP in order to fund growth in the market. Japan has been running at quite high levels for quite a while. Italy, you can see, is slightly coming down, but the one that stands out is the US. Recently, the Trump administration issued a bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's to provide fiscal stimulus for the economy. Now, if this bill is successful, obviously it should lead to higher economic growth. But the challenge is that the debt relative to GDP is increasing. So we can see here a projection that the debt to GDP ratio will continue to rise. And the challenge facing the US government is the interest payments. Because currently the yield required on this debt is higher than in the past. And we can see here that now almost 4.5% of GDP is spent just on paying the interest expense. And what's important here is how do they manage this debt to GDP ratio? And that is where their concerns about inflation comes in, is that investors' expectations is how the government in the US will deal with the debt to GDP. If they continue to tolerate high inflation, by implication, your debt in nominal terms will decline. And we've already seen that in the US, where they're targeting a 2% inflation, they've been running inflation above that level since 2021. And this is a concern for investors, is that the US Federal Reserve is no longer targeting a 2%, but they're happy to tolerate higher inflation. And when you have higher inflation and that inflation expectation comes through to investors, gold typically provides as an inflation hedge. So this risk to the inflation outlook is another reason why we think the gold price will be able to sustain prices going into 2026. And then the fourth one that's very much linked to the inflation outlook in the US is the fact that the dollar is currently losing ground to its trading partners. So if we look at the graph here, this is the dollar relative to its trading partners. So it's a weighted exchange rate to other developed market currencies. And what you can see is the long-term cycles where the dollar depreciates and then again appreciates. And these cycles typically 7 to 8 years. And we've just now in the cycle currently where the dollar is depreciating. It's down 10% year to date. And the main reason for this is the fact that interest rates in the US is declining, whereas interest rates in its trading partners is either stable or they are hiking interest rates, with the impact that investors are earning a lower interest yield on US dollar investments relative to other developed markets, forcing investors to reconsider where they place their short-term deposits and cash investments because they are getting better yield somewhere else. And as this money is moved out of the US into other markets, you can see the pressure on the exchange rate. So currently, the Fed is probably going to cut rates again in December, and that potentially will lead to a further weak dollar. If we look at our scorecard for the outlook for gold into the medium term, as I mentioned, central banks is a new buyer in the market. Prices currently is slightly elevated, but we suspect as the prices comes down, some central banks will re-enter the market, creating a natural floor for the gold price, something which wasn't there a couple of years back. Geopolitical risk potentially could come down if we can see de-escalation in Europe and the Middle East. The tension in China and Taiwan, I think, will probably remain. If we look at the inflation and the fiscal concerns, inflation expectations is still anchored around 2.2, 2.4% in the US. So not really increasing, but that's something that we are monitoring. And hence we see the risk to the upside. And that implies that any further inflation expectations that continues to increase could provide further support for the gold price. And then, as I mentioned, as the US continues to cut interest rates compared to their trading partners, will place further pressure on the dollar, which means that the gold as a storer of value increases. So overall, we think the gold price potentially could maintain levels and potentially slightly move higher into 2026, which is why we are currently holding gold exposure in our portfolios. The second topic, which is getting a lot of attention, is the artificial intelligence and those companies that's driving this technologically. And it's surprising if we see the market for the year. So this is end of the quarter 2025. Global equities as measured by the MSCI ACWI, so that includes emerging markets in dollar terms. So over that 12-month period, the market was up 17.3%. If we exclude the top 10 companies that's currently involved in the build-out in artificial intelligence, so NVIDIA, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Broadcom, Amazon, Taiwan Semiconductor, ASML, Oracle, and Google, the market was basically only up 9.6%. The 10 companies on their own was up by almost 40%. So a large part of the market is currently being driven by the outlook for these 10 companies. And investors are right to ask whether we are potentially back in a bubble territory. And the best comparison that we can do is to compare it back when the build out of the internet in 2000, when companies like Global Crossing and Lucent Technologies and Nortel were basically putting in all the fiber networks required to roll out the internet. When we compare today and we compare those companies to the leaders in 2000, and we look at valuation measures, we do see that the valuations aren't as excessive as it was in 2000. So if we look at the price to earnings ratio, so essentially how much dollars are investors paying for earnings, currently we're paying $26 for $1 of earnings. At the peak of the bubble in 2000, investors were paying $52 for $1 of earnings. If we look at the enterprise value to sales, so the value of the company relative to the sales being generated, currently it's sitting on 6, and in 2000 it was sitting on 8. So valuations are high, but it's not as stretched as it was at the peak of the bubble in 2000. Another valuation ratio is comparing the valuation to the growth outlook. So the way we look at that is, again, we're looking at the price to earnings multiple. So how much are you paying for earnings? And we look at that relative to the anticipated earnings growth. This is referred to as the PEG ratio, price to earnings growth ratio. And we can see here on the MSCI World and on the technology sector, it's sitting currently on about 1.6, 1.7 times. If we go back to the peak, you can see it was above 2%. If we just look at reported earnings, so instead of looking earnings what's expected by the market, we look at earnings that's reported, we can see that it's sitting currently at 1.7. So again, it's not as high as the peak of 2000. So at the valuation level, we can see valuations are high, but it's not excessively high yet. The third one is comparing the valuation ratio to the margin of the business. And here we look at return on equity. So the price to book ratio as an indication of the value of the business. In 2000, you can see that these blue dots being plotted here. So the price to book ratio was around about 7 to about 11 times. And you were basically getting a 20% margin on the business, or 20% return on equity. Today, you can see the price to book ratio is higher than it was, but you are getting a much higher profitable business. So again, valuation levels are high. You're getting a better margin though. The one thing that is concerning is when we back out the anticipated growth that's required to justify the valuations. So basically doing a very simple valuation methodology where you back out the future growth and dividends, and you determine what is required from these companies. What stands out from this exercise is that you need basically dividend per share growth, DPS, of 25% per annum. It's not impossible for these high growth companies to generate them. Our concern as investors is there's very little room for error or disappointment. And we think that the market is pricing in very high returns. And if any of these companies disappoint, given where valuations are, investors might get a much lower return. What I do want to highlight though is when we look back at 2000, the balance sheets of the companies is much, much stronger. You can look at different measures, so cash to market cap, you can look at net debt, you can look at return on equity as we mentioned. So the companies are generating more profit and their balance sheets are stronger when compared to the bubble of 2000. The big concern though is the massive capital expenditure being deployed by these companies to be competitive in the artificial intelligence space. So if we look at the CapEx spending, you can see the massive jump just since 2023. And these CapEx spending would require substantial return on investment for investors. And I think that is what we are monitoring. And the reason why these companies are spending, because these new business models being built on top of the artificial intelligence learning models requires a company to be fully invested to maintain its market share. So if we look at two very simple examples, if you just take Google versus Microsoft, both companies need to invest aggressively if they want to maintain their market share in online search or new business models they want to roll out. The risk for us as investors in this scenario, both companies might tend to overinvest. So companies need to invest to protect their business models, but it implies that capital is being allocated at much higher rate of return that's required. Currently, what's to the benefit of these companies are that they are very cash flush. So they do have a lot of cash that they can deploy. And we've already seen that the capex expenditure as a percentage of free cash flow is increasing. But the rate at which they are required to continue this is what's causing a concern for us. Because historically, these companies were either buying back shares with the cash, or they were investing in new projects, or they were basically paying out dividends. Now they are basically putting it back into infrastructure development. And at 60%, they are running out of basically options to fund. When compared to 2000, the companies that were raising the infrastructure were basically raising capital by issuing new equity. So the IPOs there was excessively high going into 2000. We haven't seen it yet because the companies are generating sufficient cash. So at this stage, we need to monitor how they are financing the future cap expenditure. We've recently seen Facebook or Meta coming out raising debt, and all of a sudden we can see the share price is taking strain as investors are starting to realize that the balance sheets of these companies are going to weaken as they are required to spend more and more to be competitive. So when we look at a scorecard of risk factors that we monitor, as I mentioned, valuations are high, but it's not at the excessive levels yet. So valuations we monitor on a daily basis to see where they are moving towards. And then we are managing the balance sheets, looking at where the balance sheets are, how they are raising debt, how they are financing these new projects. So these are the two warning signs for our portfolios. Currently, we are underweight most of these high-tech companies, just because we think that the risk now is potentially to the downside of these companies, and too much growth is being priced in for 2026. So we are much more cautious especially in the technology company space, and that implies that our portfolios are diversified into other components of the market. And that is our summary for 2025, looking into 2026. And I wish you all a good festive season.